A quorum being present and it being shortly after 10 o'clock, I will call to order the Peninsula RTPO's board meeting for October 20th. And with that, I thank everyone for attending. I'm glad to see such a large participation. What I do at this point is I introduce everyone. I know we all know each other, but I do that for the viewing public or anyone who may look at this on our website later because it is available. So looking at my screen, and then if you just raise your hand and wave, the public can know who, if their screen looks different than mine. Thera Black is our RTPO coordinator. I am Beck Ashby. I chair the Peninsula RPTO, and I represent the city of Port Orchard. Nicole Gauthier is I'm probably going to get your title wrong, but she's the General Manager, Executive Director of Jefferson Transit. John Clausen is the Executive Director of Kitsap Transit. Wendy Clark Getson is a representative from the Jamestown Sklallam tribe. Michael Bateman is representing the city of Paulsbo. He is the alternate. We expect Ed Stern to be joining us later. Leslie Snyder is a council person from the city of Bainbridge Island. Marty Allen is a representative from the Skokomish tribe. Miranda Nash is with Jefferson Transit, and they are our fiscal agent, and she is the person responsible for our books. Dick Taylor is with the Port of Shelton. Ed Coviello is with Kitsap Transit and is the second RPTO coordinator. Randy Netherland is a commissioner for Mason County and is the vice chair of the committee. Gary Anderson is with the Port of Bremerton. And Vicki Grover is with the city of Bremerton. Rachel Anderson is as councilperson of the city of Sequim. Susan Matthews represents the Lower Elwha tribe. George Mazer is with the Washington State Department of Transportation, Olympic Region. Paul Hampton is with the city of Forks. Ben Thomas is a council person with the city of Port Townsend, and Amy Asher is the executive director of Mason Transit. Did I miss anyone?
Chair Ashby?
Yes.
Thera, can you let David Fort and Ted Jackson in? Thank you.
With that, joining us will be, God, am I going to have to make my screen smaller? David Fort is representing Kitsap County, and Ted Jackson is with the Port of Allen. I think, did I miss anyone? Okay. If not, again, I thank you all for attending this morning. We have a couple of really important action items, mainly the update to our bylaws and a new policy we need to take action on today. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. Is there someone who would like to move that we approve our agenda?
I move to approve. Dick Taylor.
Thank you, Dick. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve our agenda. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? Hearing none, the agenda stands approved as presented. Next, we have our consent calendar for approval. That includes the minutes from our meeting in August. It includes the annual UPWP report, and it involves the RTP public participation plan. Is there anyone who would like to move to approve the consent agenda, or are there any items on the consent agenda you would like to move? Michael Bateman, is there anyone who would like to approve?
All right, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This
Second.
is Amy Asher, I'll second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be moving or voting against the motion? Hearing none, the consent agenda stands approved as presented. Okay, moving down to our action items, we have a letter of support policy brought forth today for approval. Sarah, did you want to take this item or?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is just a really quick reminder. This was something that came up out of the bylaws review discussion. Beck brought this to the attention of the group back in the springtime to say PRTPO regularly submits letters of support for projects that our members put forward for grants, but we really didn't have a policy guiding that. And so as those of you who've been around the last 4 years know, we are trying to make sure we've got all the building blocks in place, you know, to guide the organization into the future. And this seemed like an important policy to have. So we brought to you in August a draft letter of support policy that had sort of been developed with the help of a working subgroup. And you all reviewed it then, made no changes to it. We sent it for review by Lisa Nickel, our legal counsel. She made a few little tweaks to it if anybody's interested. I've got the markup copy, but basically what you have is unchanged from what you reviewed in August. And so what we'd be looking for today is for your approval of Resolution 05-2023, adopting the the PRTPO letter of support policy. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions about the letter of support policy?
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Please.
I can make the motion.
Okay.
I move to approve Resolution 05-2023, adopting the PRTPO Letter of Support Operating Policy.
Thank
Second.
you. Is there a second? Thank you. And Wendy, do you want to open the discussion?
Yes, please. I think it's a great policy. It's very thorough. Glad that Lisa Nichols took a look at it, but I hope in the future that we can simplify it. I think it has grown to be very extensive, and hopefully it can be made into something that's streamlined. And my second comment is that I appreciate that the group included tribes, and that when the tribes outreach to the public, it's sometimes a different public, but that there is a tribal TIP identified in this policy. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the letter of support policy? Hearing none, it has been moved and seconded to adopt Resolution 05-2023, approving the PRTPO's letter of support policy. Is there anyone who would be wishing to vote against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would wish to vote against that motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. Thank you. Now we will go down to the biannual bylaws review. And this year we did, the committee did have some minor changes to the bylaws. And this particular action does require a 2/3 majority vote of our group. But if we use the unanimous consent I think that will cover that. However, if there's anyone who does wish to vote against the motion when it's made, we will do a roll call vote. So with that, Sarah, I will give it back to you to talk about the bylaws.
Sure, thank you. So this is, again, this is part of PRTPO's established process to review the bylaws every 2 years, make sure they're current, meet the organization's needs. The review that was completed in the springtime revealed a few things that could be improved upon. And so we brought to you in August, after working through with a bylaws working group, we brought to you in August a proposed amendment package. The big points to call out, while it did not change at all the process for how new members join PRTPO as voting members, it did clarify better than the original language did the process by which new tribes can join as voting members of PRTPO, and different than non-tribal entities wanting to join PRTPO. And that is consistent with state law. And it was the way the original language was just a little bit muddled on that. So we clarified that in the language. And then there was also addition referencing the authorities granted to the PRTPO chair to reflect what was happening in tandem, which was the letter of support policy. So granting the chair the authority to sign letters of support as in accordance with that policy. And then some other cleanup things that clarified the language as far as what we mean by county and city as entities, and participation on the TAC. So mostly housekeeping, cleanup things, no substantive change. We brought that to you in August. There was no changes recommended by the board at that time. Again, we sent this to Lisa Nickel for review, and she made a few minor changes just to clarify the language, but no substantive changes. And if anybody's interested, as I said, I have a markup copy that I'd be happy to share. And otherwise, with approval of the board, if what we'd be looking for today is to approve resolution 06/2023, amending the PRTPO bylaws as presented. So happy to answer any questions, and otherwise turn it over to you, your action.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions on the bylaw update? I will say that the committee was actively engaged in presenting ideas for this. It was, a very well attended and quite a bit of discussion. So with that, is there, okay, I guess what I'm also going to say is Brendan Meyer has joined us. He represents Clallam Transit, and I believe Lindsay Warm-Schwarm has joined us also. He is our secretary and is a council person from the city of Port Angeles. So we've got more attendees. This is good. And Wendy, were you just saying hello, or did you have a comment?
I just decided to electronically raise my hand so I could move to approve the bylaw changes for 2023.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it. It's Brendan Meyer.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any discussion, comments, questions on the bylaw changes? Hearing none, there is a motion on the floor to approve resolution 06-2023, amending the bylaws as presented. Is there anyone who would desire to vote against the motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? Hearing none, the motion stands approved with unanimous consent. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate us getting through those two action items. They're pretty important to our group. So thank you very much for the work you did leading up to today's meeting and approving both resolutions today. Moving on down, we also want to talk about our Transportation Outlook legislative folio. And again, Sarah, I'm going to let you give the background on this. And we have people in attendance today who've been active in the formation of this. So,
Sure. Yeah. And in fact, well, I'm just going to set the stage and really, I think, lean on those of you who've participated in this process to really fill in the detail on it. This is the final draft version of what we'll be calling Transportation Outlook 2024. This is the Executive Board's annual legislative folio that is used to educate legislators across the region. We have 12, educate them about what is sort of on PRTPO's top of mind list of concerns that perhaps reflect opportunities for engagement or support from the legislature, or to increase awareness or call for action. So you all have used this platform over the years in different ways. We've had a legislative work group provide input to this process every year, and this year was no exception. And just for those of you who have not participated on that process before, they come together to first come up with sort of like the key themes, the key messages. We brought that to you in August. No changes from the board at that point. So then we went back and worked with the TAC and this work group to flesh that out into what you see in front of you as a draft folio. With those, putting some detail on those messages, and also developing a list of projects that's sort of illustrative of the kinds of need across the region, and so that all comes together. It comes to you now for your approval, any refinements you need to make to it, whatever, so that it is really truly this board's message piece. And then we use that to reach out to the legislature and initiate dialogue, and we'll talk about that. But I think maybe first, before we talk about the legislative outreach with it, how we use this, and the idea that it has come up from the work group, Beck, maybe see if there's any feedback on the folio itself before moving forwards.
yes. So the folio, I look at it kind of in 3 sections, and the first section is what we call the page 1 items, and those are the things that the work group and the board said we really want to highlight. The next section I look at is more the page 2 items. These are also really critical to us, and they're there. They're things on our radar, things that we want our legislators to continue to be aware of. And then a list of projects, and the list of projects is simplified this year. We had it a little more complicated in past years, and the group asked us to simplify it, and so Sarah did that. And just so that everyone understands, this group of projects, each of our member jurisdictions are invited to put a project on the list. There is no review of these projects. They are not prioritized in any way. So, and that was quite a point, is how are we going to use this list? And what we have done in the past, and what this list is simply our jurisdiction saying this is the most important project for us to make sure stays in front of the legislators' eyes. And so with that, I can see on the screen, Michael Bateman was involved in our meeting. The last meeting, Leslie Snyder was involved. Lindsay was involved. Randy Netherland was involved. Sarah and I were there. So anyway, I would ask those who attended, any of your comments or concerns or support of the legislative folio. Michael, I see you unmuted yourself.
I did. I was just going to say that I think this is a very important piece. It's easy to kind of sit back and say, oh yeah, we just keep doing it the same way we always have done. But it's important to go to the legislators and pay attention to this. It's also, I want to commend you and Thera for doing such a great job of balancing everybody and on all of our individual little niggles and bits and things that we think are important and may or may not. We all have to get reminded occasionally that we need to stay in our wheelhouse. It's like, that's not your project. You need to be talking about your project, or just trying to fit an awful lot of need and an awful lot of discussion points in a fairly concise messaging to the legislature that captures most everything and is clear. You guys have done a great job. Thank you.
You guys provide good input. So that's, I will just say, being able to take the fact that you all provide direction is really helpful. Otherwise, it's a staff, it's like my idea of what PRTPO needs. So it really is meant to reflect what the input is, from you all. So it couldn't happen without your participation.
So is there any more? Oh, Leslie, please.
I just wanted to say that I love the retitling of the graph, and maybe it was, what was it, Michael, that made the suggestion for that? But just sort of putting the sort of the intent of what we need to take away from it actually in the title. It makes it a lot clearer and whatnot. So I really appreciate that.
And I appreciate too that the project list has been titled Transportation Investment Needs. Even though some of the projects look like they are secured and fully funded, the investment has not been made yet. And we need to secure that it's going forward in a timely way, which is the same, the hot pocket that Simdar's interchange. You don't want to see that happen anywhere else in our jurisdiction where projects get backburnered and then you have to work hard to bring them back to the front burner. So I think this is a very good list showing a lot of projects on state highways, which should be consistent with the state planning documents.
Thank you. And I know that Randy would commiserate with you on projects getting put on the back burner. And he has been very successful in moving the freight corridor in Mason County forward. So yeah, appreciate all of that hard work. Are there any more, any more? Oh, please, David.
Sorry, can't find my little raise hand thing for some reason all of a sudden after all these
We
years.
took it away from you.
Yes, there are. One thing that is missing in this thing in the write-up is ferries. There's not a word in there about ferries, and that seems kind of strange for the Olympic Peninsula and Kitsap Peninsula that we don't mention ferries when we're talking about the states.
David, I would agree with you. The word ferries did not come up in our work group. And I was surprised at that, considering the issues that we have had with ferries.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a project listing, but definitely in the, somewhere in the write-up, squeezing it in somehow.
Yeah, good point. Good catch. I live that every day, every work day.
I guess that would be consistent with this back page with the rows of projects highlighted in red, is to identify some vessel that needs to be rehabbed or constructed. Don't know if that would make sense.
Do you think that's where it belongs, Wendy? Or do you think we should squeeze there's more on our radar section?
Yeah.
There's
it's a system issue, not a project issue, as part of that. And so it's, advancing basically their plan, trying to push it forward and to make it operational. And I mean, they have enough people dictating exactly what they should do. It's just get something done, move it forward.
It is a system issue. And in the narrative, we could also infer, fix your labor issues. But if we didn't want to go the full distance, I would definitely highlight, the missing piece, the missing vessel that's messing up the schedules because there's not enough boats. There's not enough people to run the boats.
Well, we do kind of call it out, don't we, in the pavement preservation, asset management, and state of good repair? I know it's kind of buried in that last little message, but we do speak to ferry terminals and vessels. It might justify having its own area, but it's just kind of buried in there.
Yeah, I would say it's buried. You have to look for it there.
Yeah, wouldn't hurt to have another bullet. Then there's more on our radar. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you
I think
you
that's an
could fit
appropriate
it-
place.
Do you think you could fit it in there?
Sure, there's a lot you can do with spacing and font changes and stuff. So yes, we can, I'll tuck another one in before or after the broadband piece, however I can make it fit best in there.
Is the group in agreement with that?
And to stay focused on a system, systemic need and not calling out a specific vessel, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure that Vicky, wherever Vicky is, would agree with that. Bremerton is hampered quite a bit. And again, our gratitude to Kitsap Transit to running their passenger-only ferries more frequently.
Well, and in Port Townsend, Coopville is also impacted. So I'm glad you brought it up, David. It's a huge thing for this region.
Yeah, I made the mistake of getting the Coopville Port Townsend route alerts on my phone. Okay, because I take that ferry quite regularly, and
I did the same too. I had to cancel it.
oh yeah, I mean every day there's a problem with it. So
Yeah.
okay, so we're in agreement that we will put that under more on our radar section on the back so that the legislators know that is a priority for us. Now, the other thing we want to talk about is how we're going to do the legislative forum this year. We have done it a variety of ways over the years. And when I say over the years, I mean the last 4 years, because I don't know how it was done when DOT was our lead planning agency. But since we've been operating independently, we have done it several different ways. What we have experienced each year, more pronouncedly the last couple of years, is getting a date and time that works for our legislators. And last year, the one legislator that was available was only available during the day. And then that limited the number of participants because many of our members or our representatives have day jobs and it's hard to get the time for another day meeting. So what the work group talked about, and I thought was genius, was that we hold the legislative forum at our regular meeting in December. That way we have the time and the place and the people there, and we invite our legislators who can make it to that meeting. The format of what it would look like, would still be open for discussion, but I'm assuming the format would be fairly similar to what we have done in the past, and that's explain the folio and then have an open discussion with our legislators. It's always been fairly, well, in the last 2-3 years, it's been fairly informal, and that seemed to work well. So we're putting that out there just as an idea, and that is open for discussion on how we want to move forward with educating our legislators this year. Lindsay, you were part of that discussion. Do you want to chime in at all?
Well, a lot of it was just the challenge of scheduling with a lot of people's really tight calendars. So knowing that it's a time that works for all of us, and it's also almost 2 months away, hopefully it works well enough for a number of our representatives. Another thing that I've pointed out in this process is this is an opportunity for us to collectively learn how we tell our story to our state lawmakers. And so it's valuable in many ways for us to have a larger group, and for them to know like a lot of us are passionate about this and working together too. That's something that lawmakers can sometimes forget when we talk to them one-on-one, that here we have, you know, everyone from Skokomish to Nia Bay working together on transportation planning.
Ed?
Yes, we have another attendee who wishes to join, Ashley.
Figure out how to get you access to do this, Ed. Just can't.
I know, I can't figure it out
All
either.
these moving pieces, so thank you. And Ashley is the alternate, is George's alternate. So
Okay.
with WashDOT.
Okay. Leslie, you were at that meeting too. Do you have any comments on what the forum should look like? Is Leslie still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are.
I mean, I think it makes perfect sense to keep it at a regularly scheduled meeting. So I'm not sure what it would bump, but I think we decided at that meeting that there was time in the agenda for it.
And I will say there was an opportunity to schedule it that way because we did have an opening there, and so instead of me scheduling an outside speaker to come talk to you, it fits right in. And the thinking about it very early, I mean, it came about a week and a half ago, is that it would make sense maybe to make it the first hour of the meeting so that they could come in, you know, after the roll call. We'd go right into that forum, and then they could stick around if they wanted to. They are your ex officio board members. So if they wanted to attend the rest of the meeting, and it could be an interesting meeting for them to sit in on, but at the very least, they would know that it was just that 1 hour commitment, tops, if it was a whole hour.
Okay, again, as I'll just mention that we've done this differently over the years, and this is an opportunity to try a new way and see if it benefits not only them, but us. So with that, if there's no further discussion on either the folio or the forum or presentation, I would look for a motion to approve the 2023 legislative folio and the method for the forum.
As
Fully
amended.
Yeah, with the addition of the
correct.
theory reference.
Right. Is there anyone who would care to make the motion?
I move to approve the folio and the forum with the addition of the systemic ferry issue added to the folio.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve the legislative folio and the forum, the legislative folio with the update of the ferry concerns. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. Okay, excellent. I believe now we get to hear from Ed. And
Yes.
he's going to talk about the RTIP. Yes, it's your turn finally.
We're hey Tara, are you able to get Ashley in? She's still showing as an attendee.
It's possible she's not accepting the opportunity. She can't.
Okay.
So I've tried multiple times. So
Okay, just want to make sure.
yeah.
Well, it's good to be back at PRTPO. Another year, another RTIP. We have this year's RTIP is a little different than last in that the amount of projects with secured funding is roughly double that of last year if you take out the Olympic region projects. There's less Olympic region projects with secured funding than last year, but more on the local and tribal side. So that's some good news. It's over 150 projects. It can be found on our homepage. We have a highlighted area called Draft 2024-2029 Regional TIP. It includes the 3 counties of Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason County. Kitsap County goes through the Puget Sound Regional Council for their RTIP projects. The RTIP includes projects that are planned. So in other words, the jurisdiction is planning a project going forward, and they get it in the RTIP to help support their budgeting needs going forward. And then once they're awarded a grant or other type of funding, the project goes from planned to secured. Once the funds are secured, and assuming that you pass this measure here, I will immediately send these over to local programs to be included in the 2024 statewide transportation improvement program. And that's necessary to allow the projects to move forward and begin to receive their federal funding and to be obligated in the system. We do have the RTIP map again this year. I've got to make a couple updates to it. SQUIM had a couple projects that I left out, so I'm going to update that next week and post it on our website. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about this year's RTIP? And it was advertised in local papers as well in September.
Is there anyone with questions or comments on the RTIP? And I will be very honest, and I haven't looked at it. I trust all of our jurisdictions have inputted their projects appropriately, and it's usually several hundred pages long.
Yeah.
It's
a lot. It's a lot of work. You're appreciated, Ed.
Thank you. And then we have another staff member here at KT who helped put it together. Her name's Crystal. She's not here with us, but I want to give credit to her. She formatted and put that together. And I also want to give credit to our GIS folks at Flow Analytics who formatted the projects and helped me geocode everything. And
it is a lot
good.
of work. Yeah, we appreciate all the effort you put into it.
Thanks. And after this, I'm going to go into SAW and very slowly, because it's a slow system, forward the projects one by one to local programs. So you'll see my screen blacked out, and that's what I'm going to be doing.
Speaking of a lot of work.
I think Marty has a question.
Yeah, Marty?
I just had a comment. I just wanted to thank Ed also, because I know he helped me put our sidewalk project on the RTIP also. So yeah, great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I hope the project's going well.
Oh yeah, it's about finished now. The state side is finished. They're well, not quite. There's one more light standard that needs to be wired, and then they hook to existing. But
Cool.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve resolution 07-2023, approving the 2024 to 2029 Regional Transportation Improvement Plan?
Somebody? Anybody?
Dick Taylor, I move to approve the RTIP.
Thank you, Dick. Is there anyone who would second the approval of the RTIP?
I'll second the approval of the RTIP
Thank
in
you.
resolution 7/2023.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve resolution 07-2023, approving the 2024 to 2029 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Hearing none, the RTIP is approved with unanimous consent. Thank you. And again, thank you, Ed, and your staff for all the work you do on that.
Thank you. I'm going to start submitting projects.
Okay, thanks. Now, we'll go on down. Our next agenda item is again for Thera, and she's seeking direction on a call for projects for the 2024 Transportation Alternative Program.
Yes, thank you. And I'm very specifically saying direction and not action because we're just in such a compressed time frame. I don't have the ability to do what I think we're going to be talking about doing and talk to you about it today and then come back in December and get approval to take the next step. So anyways, we're here to talk about transportation alternatives, program funding. This is a responsibility that WashDOT gives to RTPOs, rural RTPOs, to identify funding priorities to receive federal transportation alternatives funds. As I indicated in the staff memo, it is funding that's available for a wide range of projects. Most commonly, people think of it for bicycle pedestrian kinds of projects, some safe routes to school types of projects, environmental, above and beyond environmental retrofit, education, those types of things. No road building with these projects, but lots of other kind of things. The way the funding allocations work from the feds to the state and then the state to PRTPO is that you've got, let's call it, it's bumped up a little bit now, about $300,000 a year that can be programmed. PRTPO last conducted a call for projects, a big call for projects in 2020, and that was for a 4-year time period, and it was over $1 million. And at that time, we thought, well, maybe we'll try this every 2 years because we'd fallen way behind in programming. And so in 2022, we conducted another call.
What's my yeah.
I'm going to just do this. Sorry, I think. And so we conducted a call for projects in 2022 and got no takers. And when we debriefed later with the technical advisory committee, one of the things, sort of the big takeaway we had was that there just wasn't enough money on the table to make a competitive regional process worthwhile. The region will have to have a certain amount of funding that goes into rural areas and a certain amount of funding that goes into urban areas. And when you start taking a small pot of money and making it even smaller, we start getting into inefficient use of federal funds. And so the way it was left was that we would consult again. The board directed that we consult with the TAC to get insight as to when it would be appropriate to do another call for projects. So fast forward to January 2023, we talked with the TAC then, and they said, come back and talk to us in the fall. And so in September, I went to the TAC and said, well, okay, what do you think? So we actually have a little bit more money now. If we look at 4 years worth of funding, we'd have about $1.4 million available. And that's a large enough pot of money to make a competitive process worthwhile. So the way we left it with the TAC is that I was coming to you to carry the recommendation that we launch a call for projects early in 2024 for transportation alternatives for $1.4 million, that we use a process that we can just go back in and sort of refresh our old process. We're not starting from scratch, so we can efficiently go back to the TAC in November, make any updates that are needed to make to the materials, the application materials and the process details and the schedule, and then come to you in December with an action item to approve the launch in January of 2024 of a new call for projects for transportation alternatives. And so that's what I'm coming to you today with is that sort of proposal as recommended by the TAC. And if the board concurs that a call for projects early in and I'm saying January 2024, but we haven't confirmed the schedule with the TAC, but that could make a whole lot of sense for reasons, scheduling wise. Then if the board thinks that that's a good idea, then I will work with the TAC, like I said, in November to update the materials and then come to you with a formal proposal in December. And then you would probably be taking action in June on the final recommendation. And then that would provide some funding certainty for the recipients in case they're needing to mix and match dollars from other grant programs. So we're trying to stay out of the crowded summer grant window when a lot of state programs are open. Provide that certainty, keep the money flowing. And what this would do is program ahead to 2026. So you would not then do another call for projects for 4 years after this. So with that, I turn that over to you for your discussion. I think if anything, I'm looking to see, is there any opposition to taking these next steps? And any questions that you might have, or anything that you would want the TAC possibly to consider when I go to work with them on the process.
Just for clarification, Sarah, Kitsap County is not eligible for these funds. That goes through PSRC.
I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that, Beck. Yes, this is for the 3 rural counties, the 3 most rural counties, or the three rural counties in the region.
And all of the jurisdictions are state or are counties, cities, ports, transit are all eligible.
Tribes, all, yeah.
Everybody.
As well as, I mean, we've never had it happen, but you could have a school district apply. You could, I mean, other entities beyond our members could throw a project in the ring if they could meet the funding eligibility to be able to manage federal funds.
Yeah. So is there any discussion on this? Any questions, any concerns, particularly from our technical folks that are here today? I see Michael Bateman and Wendy and David Fort. And Paul, I'm assuming you're kind of a technical guy too. Does it sound reasonable to come out for a call for projects in the first part of 2024? Where is Steve Gray when you need him?
I'd say it certainly does to me, and I think that was the consensus of the group. But being a Kitsap County person, you know, we don't really have much of a say in it. But yeah, I think that it sure does make sense. I think you guys have done a good job of collecting together a pot of money that is enough to make it reasonable to go after when you're going after federal funds.
Wendy?
I attended the last TAC meeting, and I did feel that there was multiple jurisdictions that were prepared and had projects in mind, and that it was the correct dollar amount that has accumulated in the funds that have been set aside for the Peninsula RTPO. And yes, so long as we're not inundated with too many grant NOFOs occurring at the same time, it should be a very productive session. I don't know if there's a window of time that's ever going to be one off of only having this particular call for projects, but I'd like to think that there I will find it. Thank you.
And Wendy, I never seen anything like the NOFOs coming out one after the other, but what I can commit to making sure our process is not overly complicated, you know, and commensurate with what it is and the level of funding. It should be a fairly streamlined process for people to participate in.
Okay, we do not need a motion. There is just looking for direction. So can we just get a thumbs up with your support of having a call for projects the first part of 2024? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up. So go ahead there. I think that gives you the information you need to move forward.
Thank you. The tricky part is to make sure I don't get out of, to keep everything in sync. So thank you for accommodating that. And we'll be back to you in December with details of the package. And if anybody has any questions between now and then, I know we have new members who had not participated in the process before and for whom this might all seem very foreign. And so if that's you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to share an overview of what we did before and how this will be similar to it.
Yeah. And when we started what we call programming ahead and being able to accumulate funds over years, it makes it a more realistic process. Before, we were dividing up $215,000 annually, and that didn't seem efficient. So thank you all for allowing us to move forward with that. And now I'm excited to listen to the next discussion. And this is part of our regional transportation plan update that we're doing in this next biennium. And Sarah has very systematically scoped out what work we need to do when. And this is actually part of that effort. And it's kind of a visioning and strategic design part of the work we're going to be doing. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you. And I look forward to the active engagement of all of our members.
Thank you, Beck. And I do too, because this is your regional transportation plan. So it needs to reflect what your ambitions are for the region, what your priorities are for the region, the things that you think are important, what PRTPO brings to the table. And so I'm here today to have the first of what I think will be at least 2 and maybe 3 conversations with you about vision and strategic direction for the regional transportation plan. And I see Ed is just logging in. Ed Stern has just arrived back. I'm not sure if you saw that pop up, but so Ed is now here. And welcome, Ed. We're just starting to have a discussion about the regional transportation plan and the vision for and the strategic direction. And I wanted to start by saying that when we think about vision for the plan, let me take a step back. You adopted a regional transportation plan in 2019 that continues to meet the bare minimum state requirements laid out in RCW 4780. And as we talked about in August, as we did a little bit of a retrospective and a historical perspective, we talked about this RCW 4780, which drives so much of what your work program is oriented around. It's very outdated legislation. You're not going to fix that. I'm not going to fix that. It is somebody else's issue to deal with. But that legislation was laid out to help guide startup activities for the Growth Management Act. And so, and it's never been updated. It had very little update to it over the years. It's mostly pre-GMA startup activities and updates on, especially related to human services transportation planning and consolidated grants. But mostly the nuts and bolts of it that drive the RTP are really oriented towards GMA startup activities. And so as we look at going forward, this plan update and the resources that PRTPO has, I mean, I've got to be very candid about what PRTPO's resources are and are not. When we look at that, we can use this RTP update opportunity to go back and rehash all the goals and policies and vision and everything that's, and start from scratch. Or we can say the nuts and bolts of that, what we have checks all the boxes that it needs to check for RCW 4780. What it doesn't check can be met with administrative updates. And if we do that, then what we can focus on now with this update, with the process that we're in right now, is what is the executive board's long-range vision for regional planning in this region, what it brings to the table, what does PRTPO bring to the table, we can focus on what are the big issues that you see out there on the horizon, at bringing your collective expertise to the table, that if PRTPO isn't pointing at it, who is? And develop a strategic action plan around that really reflects you and your vision for this region and what you see the role of PRTPO and coordinated regional planning being. And an example I'll put out, I've been really inspired working with you all over the last 4 years, going through this legislative update process. The ideas that come out of that, and that's just in like a one or two meetings with a subgroup in the summertime, That's really the heart, I think, of what your plan can be, broader speaking. And I'll use as an example the Hood Canal Bridge operational reliability. Regionally significant issue that has implications from Port Angeles to Bremerton and maybe even further beyond. And that's an example of something where PRTPO policymakers in your legislative forum, you have identified the need for greater operational reliability. You can't solve it by yourself, and you'll never have enough money to solve it by yourself. But as an RTPO, you have a bully pulpit, if you would, and a stature as an RTPO to raise issues like this with the legislature or with other stakeholder groups to say, this is something that's really important to our region, and we need to, in our convener role, need to bring the right players around the table and get the right people dialed into this so that the people who need to address it can get on the ball and address it. That is a wonderful example of a long-term an issue, a strategic an issue that affects across jurisdictional borders, clearly regionally significant in scope. I would argue in many respects it's of statewide significance, but we'll let the state figure that out for themselves. But it's regionally significant. It's not a project in terms of how you often think of projects and talk about projects. It's not, it's not a Gorst project or SR3 freight alternative or Simdar's interchange. Those all have an important, PRTPO has an important role to play with those as well. But it's an example of something, a different kind of an issue, a different kind of a problem area and project need that you as executive board members can bring light to and make and advance solutions on, even though you don't have a lot of money to put towards that. And I'm sort of emphasizing what your role is in this as we start to talk about what the vision is for your regional transportation plan, because within a couple of years, there's going to be somebody different sitting in my chair. And the odds are very, very good at that point that you will have more experience with RTPOs and what it takes to run an RTPO and be an RTPO and what value they bring to the process. You will have more experience with that than the person who's sitting in my chair at that time. And so this RTP is a chance for you as a board collectively to set your own vision, to set the vision for the region of what regional planning means for the region, what PRTPO brings to the table. And then from that, define what the, what a strategic action plan looks like. And then that in turn can integrate beautifully in with your legislative agendas every year, your work program, possibly even your regional tip. And I'm laying this out to you in this way because when we start talking about vision, and I've got the vision of the current plan, and I can do a screen share and bring it up. I probably should have included it in the mail out, but you've got a good 1.5 page description that talks about what the system will be in the future, and that's good. That's exactly what you've got to have to meet the state requirements. But in terms of a plan that's going to give you value and provide value going forward and build momentum on something, I think what you're going to be wanting to talk about in terms of vision is something a little bit different. And so before I bring you any draft language on what a vision statement could look like, I wanted to just have an open discussion with you about what you want this RTP to be and what you see PRTPO, what you see future executive boards as you look out, as we all try to look out 10, 20, 30 years over this next year, and we go into some, I'd like to do some exploratory scenario planning kind of exercises with you to look at the big issues that you see on the horizon and think about what the sort of the risk factors are, or the opportunities associated with them, and what are the kinds of things that could get those, move those, advance those opportunities. I think that's really where the greatest bang for the buck is going to lie with this update, and I think it could add value to you. But it's a bit of a novel approach. And because the way our schedule is in our budget, and I won't see you again until December, I just wanted to have a broad discussion with you today about this and hear what's on your minds so that I can take that and craft some language for you to talk about in December. And it even occurred to me just in getting ready this morning for today's meeting and thinking about the legislative forum, there may even be opportunity to talk with the legislators in December or maybe sometime later in this process about big issues that partnership and collaboration and coordination between PRTPO and our legislative representatives could be advantageous for everybody. So I hope that sort of nebulous background makes sense. And again, I probably should show you, I'll share with you real quickly just what, when we look at what we have today in the RTP, and I think hopefully you're seeing my screen here, but you've got what we've got here right now in the RTP and in the RTP 2040 and beyond, or RTP Regional Transportation Plan 2040, sorry about that, is, there's a vision statement that talks quite a bit about how, the modes are going to fit together in the future and people are going to have a reliable, efficient transportation system. It's going to be safe, the preservation, all the right words are in there. All the right words are in there. It boils down, this sort of opening paragraph hits it. And we could spend a lot of time going in and rehashing this vision, but we might want to focus our efforts elsewhere. And I will share that I talked with the Technical Advisory Committee last month about the goals and policies. And we could spend, I'm going to quit sharing this, we could spend a lot of time with the Technical Advisory Committee of going through and rehashing all the goals and policies. We've got a lot of goals and policies, but they kind of they've met everybody's needs so far. Mostly they're used when people need to fill out a grant application and you need to show that your project is consistent with something in the regional transportation plan. That's important and that's good. And right now with what you've got from 2019, it fits that bill. And so the TAC was saying, yeah, we'd really kind of like to focus on some other stuff. We don't really want to spend all the time we have available to do this, just going back rehashing that. I think the same is true sort of on the vision and the strategic direction. But it's the feedback that I get from you that'll help me know whether when I come to you in December, I'm bringing some draft language that really reflects, what I've been trying to say about PRTPO's own vision for this, or I come back and we're starting to rehash and rethink and fine tune and revamp the existing vision and vision statement. So at the end of the day, you're going to need a vision statement. We can either repurpose the old one and say, yep, we've got that, and now here's what the board's vision is, or we can kind of go back to the original one and make that a little bit better.
Let's hear from our board. And I don't necessarily want to be really actively engaged with this. I would really like to hear from our board members. But when I listened initially to Thera as she was speaking, and she was talking about the Hood Canal Bridge, my mind immediately, in the future, that's a critical piece for us. I went to David's mention of the ferries. That is also unique to our area in the state. I mean, I can guarantee you the ferries would be getting a lot more attention if they were more critical to the I-5 corridor. So with that said, where those ended up with me was, I think it's really important that our group realize the potential of our isolation in the event of transportation disruption. and the resiliency thing. So that's the only comments I'm going to make, because that's kind of where my mind went listening to Thera. Brendan, anxious to hear from you.
Yeah, I think the ferry thing is actually a pretty important aspect. Can you guys hear me? I've been having connection issues all morning. Yeah, I feel it's really important. I know when I first got on the PRTPO, they did they were pushing for a study to see like what kind of if Port Angeles was effectively a good candidate for a foot ferry, perhaps to Seattle, and it didn't quite meet the criteria set out according to fuel ratios and stuff. But to be ahead of the curve in technological advancements in ferries, it's a pretty old technology, but the foil ferries, so they come up out of the water, they have a lot of them in Europe, but they're so much more efficient usage of fuel in that aspect, and they move quicker through the water, and it's something to focus on, that type of efficiency when speaking of that. I think infrastructure wise around the peninsula, charging for electric vehicles is going to be a big thing. I think in making sure that infrastructure is strong, and also maybe when we talk about consistency and compliance too, like when we're doing our road works, to make sure that they meet a standard for self-driving vehicles and stuff as well, moving forward into the future. So sort of not necessarily, because there's no way to possibly future-proof, but keeping those things in mind. And the same thing with when we're talking about broadband, there's a lot of maintenance involved with laying line. And that is jobs too, but also to explore for more remote areas, partnerships with satellite internet providers and stuff like that. So I just wanted to make sure that we can future-proof as much as we can when we're thinking about our grand vision, and work within that framework.
Excellent. Wendy?
Oh, thank you. I was going to follow up with what Brandon was saying. I ran into Kelly McGurdy, who works for PSRC, at a conference in Tacoma, and I did ask her about when's the next time you're going to do that passenger ferry study that goes straight to the legislature, and she said she doesn't even have it in her sites because the legislature has not asked for it. So I think that is an interesting direction of how we bring that into our RTP, that we would like that periodical reanalysis of the different passenger ferry port locations around the peninsula, to keep that interest alive and the collection of data valid.
Okay, am I going to have to start calling on people, Lindsay? Oh, Marty raised his hand.
Yes, from listening to Thera, I think that is a good idea to go ahead and leave that language the same it is, since it already is acceptable the way it is, and concentrate, like you said, on what everybody else was saying, bringing the ferries and the Hood Canal Bridge and all that, so that we could focus on the things that, we really need to focus on for the future. That's my input.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
You're welcome back. The other thing I'd throw into this, agreeing with everyone so far, is thinking about land use. And a number of us are going through comprehensive plan periodic updates. But really, we had this time when the expectation was that transit would just go out and serve the poorly placed facility that needs transit service. And we're trying to move away from that. And the way to move away from that is not in the transit space, but actually in the land use space. So instead of being responsive to bad land use planning, can we get ahead of that? And I think that's a space where the PRTPO might want to focus in the next year or so.
Okay, now I'm going to put one of my favorite people on the spot, just because he could address some of the ferry issues, Mr. Clausen.
Beck, you have favorites.
Well, I think the only thing that I would add to this discussion. And, you know, we've touched on future-proofing this plan, and one of the areas in future-proofing, kind of a subset, we talked about fiber, we've talked about charging station, but there's also the aspect of charging station is the availability of energy at all of these different locations, and working with local utilities to be able to provide hopefully clean but adequate power resources so that we can keep moving forward with some of these other aspects that are going to be important for transportation, like charging stations, things of that nature. So that would be the one piece that I would add, just as a kind of a subset to that charging infrastructure, future proofing, that sort of thing.
Okay, now I'm not sure he's still on the call, although his name is up there. I'd really like to hear from Paul Hampton about some of the issues on the west side of the peninsula, you know, and are we addressing them?
Well, my biggest issue is I just don't know enough to do things, I guess. Like I'm working with my Bogus Hill Way project right now, and knowing the steps on how to get money, and you know, a lot of what you guys talk about, you guys have a lot more experience, and it seems like the people that can manipulate the system have a better chance of getting money than people like me, or I don't know, maybe, I don't know if LaPush Tribe has troubles with it or anybody else, but just having the experience on how to do that and knowing what the next steps are is confusing for me, because I'm also in charge of wastewater or everything else. So it's not something I sit down and concentrate on, because one minute I get pulled out to go work at the jail, you know, to fix a door or something like that. So doing this, a lot of times we have to bring in a consultant, and there's not a lot of money bringing consultants. And to do that, you know, how to do grants, I never wrote grants that much. So it's really interesting to see it all work, because a lot of times I struggle, and you guys have a vast knowledge and can easily, you know, do this and get the money and know how it all works. So it is a challenge. And then also I see roads around Forks, like our neighborhoods are falling apart, and you look at our street budgets, and my street budget for this year is $265,000. And all you guys know, that doesn't even touch anything. So being able to use grants and getting money out here to do that is real important for us. And another concerning thing is, which, you know, I'm not trying to badmouth anything, but I see a lot of stuff with the trails and the Discovery Trail, which I like Discovery Trail. I think it's a good thing, but I see a lot of roads that aren't fixed, but we have these big, huge bridges and trail system, but bad roads. And, you know, we have nice brand new buses, electric this, electric that, but we have bad roads still. So that's, you know, that's my concerns. I may be speaking out of turn, but, you know, if you ask a person from Forks or anybody that drives a road, the first thing they're going to do, they don't know all this stuff that goes on. They're going to complain about the roads. So if they see a beautiful, you know, big giant bridge going in for a trail system, they're the first ones that come to me and say, hey, how come the city of Forks is doing that and not fixing our neighborhood road? So yeah, that's, you know, that's my take on everything. I mean, I'm still learning, and a lot of it's my fault, because I'm you know, it's hard for me to sit down and get training or learn. But some of that is, you know, I tried working with people, and a lot of it, and I know that their time is valuable and important, but if this is a group where we're all trying to help each other, it seems like we'd be like, hey, we need to help this guy get more money, or help this person get more money to fix their neighborhoods. But I don't know if that's how that works. So that's why I'm saying I'm very inexperienced and not sure on how everything works, but that's my take on it. And that's what I get approached with by people in the city is, you know, why is this road not getting fixed? Not even just City of Forks roads, it's 101. Like, why is that? Why are we getting chip seal and everybody else gets paved roads? Or why is, you know, the trail is perfectly paved, but we get chip seal, you know? So that's why, that's the stuff I run into.
Paul, I really appreciate your comments because I think they very accurately reflect the situation in many rural communities across the state. I do not think it's unique to the City of Forks. And so the RTPO is here, should be here to help you. What I heard is that education and networking and convening our group to provide resources is an important element that we must continue to do or do a more thorough job. And I think that is something that we could definitely incorporate in the RTP.
A lot of the blame is on me because I have to be able to have time to come to the meetings. And like I said, I'm so spread out as a public works in a small town because usually like a big town, they have an engineer or they have a consultant that can go to these meetings and figure all and dedicate more time. But like I said, like the other day, a slider for the jail breaks down. So that takes up a lot of time to do that, to order the parts and get all that stuff. So then I'll miss a meeting or I can't concentrate on doing that. So I'm not trying to put blame on anybody, but you know, a lot of it's blame on me for not being able to attend the meetings and stuff like that. But
what it is it's the reality of rural jurisdictions. I mean, that's just the way it is. I'm sure that Marty shares a lot of your concerns because I know that, you know, he has a small budget and wears, you know, many of hats too. Really, really appreciate your comments, Paul. Is there anyone else who wants to, Lindsay?
Yeah, no, Paul's just hitting a huge issue of just it's a positive feedback cycle, but it leads us downward where we don't have enough staff to apply for the grants that would allow us to build up capacity and get ahead of maintenance. And so then we just fall further and further behind. You know, the model that National League of Cities is advocating for, at least for cities here, is more money pushed out like ARPA, where we just got it. There were guardrails around it, and we got to figure out how to use it, and not competitive grants, which require staff time up front that we now don't have to do. So that is a huge issue, and I think it is structural in how this money flows out to smaller communities. Incidentally, cities, there is a local infrastructure support team from National League of Cities for cities, so that might be really useful. I did put in chat information about a Energy Futures conference coming up at the beginning of November that North Olympic Peninsula NODC, North Olympic Peninsula Regional Conservation Development Organization is hosting, and it is invite only, but if anyone's interested in that, I can try and put in a good word for you. So reach out to me if you're interested. I can't guarantee everything there. But I do think it's important for us to be talking about electrification and transportation all in the same sentence, because in going to the different like kind of regional grid utility resiliency meetings, they see electrification of the transportation system as a threat to grid resiliency because it's putting a bunch of additional energy demand on a system that typically got its energy from fossil fuels instead, not from the grid. So there's a whole overlap, as we think, like Brendan said, of changing technologies, making sure that transportation is the link between everything, right? It's all interconnected through transportation. So yeah, the utility aspect of it, particularly around electricity, is a key part as well. Yeah, and the dream of bilateral charging to address peaking would be pretty awesome.
That's great. Ed?
Thank you, Vic. Naturally, a lot of what we're talking about is top-down, state money, federal policy, state policy, and reacting to that. But there is the bottom up aspect to think about. What can PRTPO influence? And as per the membership at the meeting this morning, our various jurisdictions, counties and cities, tribes, is to put out a statement encouraging what some of us are doing anyway, but make it a uniform statement coming from PRTPO, which would be transportation-oriented development, encouraging jurisdictions to place future housing where possible and allow for zoning and all of the rest of it in order to encourage public transit. It doesn't fix all the roads, as Paul was talking about, but it does concentrate activity. And it's hardly a visionary statement, but maybe it is. I don't know. Thera.
What I'm hearing, and please, all of you, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear is PRTPO wanting to provide service to its members, wanting to provide service to the communities that are represented around this table and their stakeholders like the PUDs and the utilities, that PRTPO wants to create opportunity, lower the barriers to opportunity where possible, again, with its mighty resources, and to inform, through this notion of bottom up, inform the decision makers who do have the authority to make the decisions, help them get as laser focused on the right issues as this body is. And that's a different kind of it's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed working with you over the last 4 years, is because of this sort of service to the community. Could you, I think that's where your strategic action plan and where your emphasis areas are going to lie, and the vision for this plan is perhaps about that role of convener and facilitator and access to opportunity through this regional process that you, the executive board, are, that you direct. I just don't hear PRTPO wanting to step into a regulatory role and say, you shall go do this, and if you don't do this, you're not consistent. I hear it more of a collaborative, cooperative intent going forwards between PRTPO and its members. I'm not hearing it wrong, am I?
And I'll let Michael talk.
Oh, yeah. Brendan hits on some things that we all deal with on a daily basis. That how come you're spending a big pile of money over there? It should be better spent over here. I'm like, and we have to educate our public that no, that money couldn't be spent anywhere else. The only way that money can be spent is on that type of project. That's what kind of money that is. And if we don't spend that money there, then we just don't get it at all. We don't get to redirect it somewhere else. That kind of education of how funding flow works, and the fact that we don't get funding for our local roadways. It only comes for our classified roads, what the difference is between a local road and a classified road. And I think a good part of that education component is already there in the plan, I believe, but it wouldn't hurt to beef it up and then help make it so that our members can use it, not only to educate themselves, but to help educate their public as to how this stuff works. And then we've been talking about electrification and the positives and minuses of electrification. But one of the things that it's doing is it's increasing vehicle weights pretty significantly, and especially the delivery vehicles, the Amazon trucks that are coming out, and it's beating the tar out of our roads shortening the lifespan of our roadway network, our local roadways, in deliveries to neighborhoods that normally would have been somebody going out to 3 or 4 stores in their personal car and picking up a few things. Now it's 3 or 4 delivery trucks coming in separate things that are pretty darn heavy, delivering to the neighborhoods. So we, at least in Poulsbo, and Ed, you're going to be seeing this eventually coming to you. We're going to be proposing that we change our roadway sections in order to accommodate that change in lifespan. We can't go to just 3 inches of asphalt in our neighborhoods anymore. We're going to need to go to 4 just to have reasonable lifespan in our neighborhood roads. And we've talked to some of the folks here about whether we might be able to, we being, local jurisdictions, advocate for the legislature, come up with a way to get some mitigation out of these delivery companies. that would come back to cities to help us in our local roads, and maybe come through Transportation Improvement Board as a mechanism to distribute funding in an efficient way, because they are probably the best organization to distribute funding like that in a clean, easy way for us to work with. Anyway, that's just something that is coming down on our side as thoughts, that things that we think of. I think that would be something that would be really, really good to get, for all of us on, especially the rural cities, to start getting some funding, because we struggle to get any kind of funding out of our general fund to go towards our local streets. I can't imagine what it's like for a much smaller city than us. There just isn't any, right?
Right. Exactly. That goes back to a lot of funding issues. We have heard from a variety of people, but our transit folks have been engaged too much. So if Amy's available, or Nicole, or John, is there anything on the transit side that warrants being part of the vision?
Well, for Kitsap right now, first and foremost, I think is this, we talked about the power and the impact of, there's obviously a large push on transits to go to zero emission vehicles. And, Michael touched on one aspect of them. We're constantly looking at how to mitigate some of those issues. Like, Michael, you talk about the weight of vehicles. Battery electric buses are right in that same category. So one of the strategies that we're looking at is doing in-route charging, such that you don't need to carry as many batteries on the vehicle, because you're going to be replenishing that charge. Then we get back to the electrical infrastructure. I'll give you one example. We're looking at the feasibility of developing a hydrogen electrolyzer. And the location that we're looking at, we've got everything we need to be able to do that except power. And to have adequate power to support it, we would have to do anywhere from $2 to $5 million worth of improvements to one of the utility substations. And it's 3-4 years away before we would be able to plug into something. So, those are just the aspects. But energy, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's electricity, those are the issues that we're all struggling with. I don't know, Nicole or Amy, you want to add anything more?
I would echo what John said. Jefferson Transit, on a much smaller scale, is looking at transitioning our fleet to zero emissions. But those are some of the same issues that we're dealing with. I also appreciated what Lindsay had to say as far as land use planning. I know for a rural agency, it is really difficult the farther out we get from the city center, providing adequate transportation. We're seeing a lot of requests for services that are currently outside of our service area. And that's something that Jefferson Transit we're talking about and we're thinking about. So we're really supportive of how can we better use and pay attention to the land use issues that are going on within the city limits of Port Townsend. And I think the city of Port Townsend is doing a great job also thinking about that, but that's something that we're thinking about as well.
Okay, is there anyone from the ports that want to offer some insight that the ports are looking at to the future? We've got Gary and Ted and Dick looking at our other port folks. Yeah.
I just have a comment.
Please.
As I listen, what I take away from it is as the PRTPO does its what it does on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of projects that we're talking about and things like that. And and before I get to that, I want to say that I think that the work product, since I've been on the PRTPO, is excellent work product. And the things that Thera and Beck, you guys do to improve the documentation, the bylaws, the functions of the PRTPO, it's all excellent stuff. And I think what that inures to is gaining relevance for the PRTPO. And so the day-to-day projects that they get, that the PRTPO gets involved in, is all very relevant, but I think it more inures to the voice that is being created by the projects they do, by the work product that's put out. And I think Ed Stern and Thera both alluded to this, that the PRTPO has a voice. And so did you, Beck, when you said that we're kind of a isolated area. It has a voice to the legislature that they should be listening to every time you make a presentation to the legislature. So if that's something that should be included in the what we're talking about here right now, the vision for the PRTPO, or it's just suggested as part of the vision to increase the voice to the legislature and increase that importance that it has to the state of Washington, I think that's important here.
Thank you. Anything else? I really do appreciate all the input that we've got this morning. Thera, did you get enough to work with?
Yes, I did.
Did you get too much to work with?
No, I did not at all.
Okay.
This is wonderful.
Okay.
It's exactly the kind I wanted to. It's about collaboration and making sure I'm reflecting what you all find important.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is that after this discussion today, you will come back in December with a draft of a vision statement, something for us to chew on a little bit more. And we're not necessarily being asked in December for a approval or anything.
No.
That
No,
we still have more input. So everybody has a chance to think about this a little more. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
This is terrific.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, I do appreciate everyone's willing to participate and share your thoughts. And Paul, I appreciate you allowing me to call on you unexpectedly. Some of our other members know that's going to happen. You probably didn't. So thank you. We had something come up recently that the executive committee thought it was important enough to just give a little briefing to this group. And it's about the designation of some of our counties' areas as urban rather than rural as a result of the last census. So Thera, do you want to give a brief to our group so the electeds are are familiar with this issue?
Sure. And as I was rereading my staff memo this morning, I was kind of like, oh, I sounded maybe a little melodramatic. I don't mean to sound too over the top here, but just in a nutshell, every 10 years after the decennial census, the feds take a look at the population, from the census, and they look at their definition of what constitutes urban, and they draw preliminary urban area boundaries that go through a process of review by Federal Highway Administration and state DOTs and MPOs to make adjustments and refinements to those boundaries. That process, like I will say that in 2020, the feds worked really hard to improve their definition of urban, to avoid what happened in 2010, which was a lot of non-urban places got designated as urban. Much of Camino Island, the Skagit Valley, got designated as urban in that definition of 2010. So they improved that definition in 2020. And there's been a process underway in Washington State since about March or April of this year to review those preliminary boundaries. The MPOs did it for the metropolitan areas. So our Kitsap partners were, although they were real, shout out David, shout out to Melissa. She was on this in March. She really, really was bringing this to PRTPO's attention even before we were hearing about it from the state. The DOT handles it for areas outside of MPOs. And just recently, as they were working their way through that process, and you know, we're sort of leaning over, looking over their shoulders as they were getting into it, we saw some stuff that looks kind of weird. And it's not to do, I just really have to be upfront. I know, George, this is for you. That our local agencies are not challenging the definition of urban as it is established in the Federal Register for, you know, the 2020 census. But the question has to do with how maybe that definition of urban applies on the ground. And so as our local partners in Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason counties were looking at the resulting preliminary areas, there's just some things that it's like, wow, if that's the definition and this is what it looks like on the ground, it's just, there are questions. It just doesn't quite make sense. And so there's a process underway right now. Our local partners are still working internally to see how, you know, is this worth running up the flagpole further? And meanwhile, I've reached out. I'm now working with somebody within the geography division of the Census Bureau, just corresponding, just building. We've got a case. I quickly got on their radar when I thought the government was going to shut down on October 1st. So, but that's good. The government did not shut down, and there's a dialogue going on. Just to understand the sense, if there is any kind of an error in the geospatial locating of data, they would want to know, and they have a process for looking at what actually happened when you run the numbers through all of their algorithms. They do have a process. It's a clunky, cumbersome process, but they do have a process for reviewing and validating the underlying base data. And if it's wrong, if there is somehow an error in the mechanics and the algorithm and the coordinates, whatever it is, there is a process for fixing that. The reason why it matters for local jurisdictions as they're looking at this is that just on the transportation side, if a facility is designated as urban instead of rural, it affects the stormwater standards for that facility. It affects the funding that can be used on that facility. And so in particular for rural counties that are responsible for managing rural roads, urban roads that are designated as urban aren't eligible for their traditional rural funding sources. There are other implications as well on the transportation side. It's also a big factor in the allocation of rural formula funds for transit, for schools, for rural public health programs, things I had never even considered before. But they're also affected if something is inaccurately designated as urban instead of rural. So this, I just wanted to update the executive committee when we met a couple of weeks ago to let them know that this was going on the sides. And then they just asked me to update you all, and that it spells it out pretty clearly in the little brief about the background and what's underway. And again, not challenge it. The process that's underway right now at the state with WashDOT and Federal Highway Administration revealed the issue, but it is not in their swim lane to fix it. It is separate. If there is an issue or if there are questions with the underlying data that need to be addressed, that it's not their role to do that. But you know, like I said, we've opened up a line of communications with the Census Bureau and working our way through that process. I'm hoping to hear by early next week from our local partners if this is something that they, you know, that they're okay to live with. And there may be, I don't know, there may be advantages to having areas erroneously designated as urban. It's really a local agency consideration there, but we will continue our communications and cooperation on the side. And by early next week, I hope to have a sense of whether or not they just want to live with it, or should we continue, you know, our communications with the Census Bureau to inquire about this. And at any point, if they say, you know, nah, you know, we can live with it, or it won't affect us that much, that's fine, and we'll stop. We just didn't want to leave them hanging out there. And I will say, whatever that designation is that comes out of this, it'll be with us. They will live with it for the next 10 years. It will not get revisited until probably about 2033 would be about when that would come back up again. So it matters. It's up to each of them to know just how much it matters. Like I said, there are some things that just don't make sense when you look at Google Earth and you look at what's actually on the ground, and you look at the definitions. It's like, and you look at the census block data, it's like, huh, how in the world did that definition result in that area being designated as urban? But that's where we're at, and just wanted to bring that to your attention.
What the point that was highlighted at the executive committee level, and I don't see Randy on the call anymore, but both sides of the Hood Canal are designated as urban rather than rural. And what that would mean to Mason County is probably extending sewer out there. That would really change their land use issues. I mean, it potentially could be very good or not so good, could be very expensive. So our goal was to inform our executive board that this could be a concern to your jurisdictions, and you may want to talk to your technical folks about it. Again, we're not concerned with the definition. We're just concerned with why these areas were designated that way. And hopefully there can be a successful resolution for all of our members.
That, if I could just, Beck, on that Hood Canal example, that there is a stretch that between the north and the south of the Hood Canal, because it runs up the North Shore and the South Shore Road. It's 35 miles by about 150 feet wide. It's 19 miles in between the highway and the water on the north side of Hood Canal, and 16 miles between the highway and the water on the south side of Hood. It's just a single row of residential wide. And where it's any wider than that, it is generally where we have the two state parks and the county park. And so that was actually my question to Chateau yesterday was, does this look right to you? Like, really? Is that what you would expect to come out of? Really, truly 35 miles by about 100 to 150 feet of urban area. It's just perplexing. So, and who knows, maybe it really does. That is really what the definition calls for. But that's what this is about, is just making sure the things that look really weird aren't supposed to, you know, that they're really supposed to be that way and not something different.
Right. It could have impact on some of our jurisdictions. And so we wanted to make sure the executive board was aware of it and could have whatever conversations they needed with their technical folks. So that's what that was about. And trying to get us a little bit back on schedule here. In fact, we're doing quite well. Is just a reminder that we will be electing new officers in February. And the way our bylaws read, the chair will bring forth a slate of candidates. And my initial understanding, well, is that I will no longer be on the executive committee. I will be terming out as chair. So we will be having a new chair. I have had conversations with Randy Netherland, our Mason County Commissioner, who is our vice chair, and he has let me know that would be difficult for him to commit to being chair for the next 2 years. So we will have at least 2 openings on the executive committee. Lindsay is our secretary at this point. And so my goal today is to let everyone know that I am open. If you would please let me know if you're interested on being the executive committee, and we can bring forth a slate of candidates in December. We will ask again in December for any nominations, and again in February before we vote, we will be asking for nominations from the floor. The executive committee doesn't have a lot of responsibilities or authority. But what we do is every month, Miranda sends us the reconciliation of our bank statement, and we review that and approve it. And we look at monthly invoices from Kitsap that Kitsap Transit sends forth. Basically, those are Thera's invoices that you see quarterly, that we see monthly, so that if there's any questions, they can be resolved before they get to the executive board. We meet typically for about an hour, a couple weeks before the executive board. Thera briefs us on any upcoming or new issues, such as this rural designation or urban designation. And we review the agenda items so that our executive committee is aware and briefed on whatever is going to be presented to the board. It is not a huge time commitment. We are also, as the executive committee, invited to meet with the Department of Transportation regarding our UPWP. We do that once a year. And we also sit in on any audit reviews. And that happens, it's been a year or so since we've had an audit. But those are kind of the functions that the executive committee has. And we are open, again, if you would please let me know if anyone is interested on serving on the executive committee. I have invited Lindsay to consider being chair, since he is on the committee now, and the other two members, myself and Randy, would be moving off the committee. It seemed important to me that we have some continuity in being familiar with how the executive committee functions. So again, we will be bringing forth hopefully a slate of candidates in December, and we will be voting on those in February. And we will also be open for nominations from the floor at both of those meetings. I don't want anyone to feel left out. Lindsay, please, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So Beck just mentioned that I would be willing to be chair. I also would be really happy if somebody else stepped forward to be chair or vice chair. I am very happy to continue in the secretary role and provide that continuity that Beck wants within the executive committee. But yeah, please, nobody feel like because Beck just said that you'd be like stepping in line. Like, please, go up to the table and please, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and hopefully Lindsay would remain on the executive committee, and he is from Clallam County. We like to have a variety, or because there's only 3 officers, only 3 of our counties typically are represented, but I believe it's important that 3 be represented. So as you all know, I am not afraid to call people, and I may be doing that if no one steps forward. The other members of our executive committee is a representative from the lead planning agency and a representative from our fiscal agent. Typically, it's John Clausen and Miranda who attend those meetings just for input from those 2 important members. So with that, you can contact me, you can call me, you can send me an email. I'm very open to putting together an effective slate of candidates for the next biennium, and they are 2-year terms. And you can have 2 2-year terms and then you term out. Okay, I think that's all with that. And so we're a little late for our public comment, but we are open now for any public comment. I don't know, Ed, is there anyone in the audience that would be wanting to speak?
No, we don't have anyone in the audience that I'm aware of. 0 attendees.
Okay, with that, I will close the public comment period and ask, Brandon has his hand up, so we will call on Brandon for his input. Thank you.
Yeah, Beck, I just wanted to let everybody know that Clallam Transit this week voted to start a pilot program for zero fare for 2024 for the whole year. So we'll be one of a small group of that have a zero fare policy, at least for the year. And we'll collect data throughout the year quarterly and see where it goes. But very excited, and it's something that I think is going to be great for our community.
Thank you. That is exciting. Is there anyone else that, our next item is RPTO member updates. Is there anything that anyone wants to share? You want to brag about, you want to whine about, or you just want to talk about? Wendy.
Yeah, I'll try to not let it sound like bragging. Jamestown's Clallam Tribe just created another slightly over a half a mile of the Olympic Discovery Trail, closing down another gap, or I should say eliminating a gap and opening up a new section of trail. And it is the AASHTO design that includes a gravel edging to an asphalt paved trail. So if anyone wants to bring their horse out, there's room for all. It is it's easily accessed from Highway 101 off of Old Lynn Highway.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with something to share? I am not seeing any more comments. So I thank you all for your attendance today. I thank you all for your engagement today. And I look forward to seeing all of you in December, and have a happy Halloween and a happy Thanksgiving.
Indeed, you as well.
Bye now.